In this video, I'm going to walk you through doing a custom installation of a Windows distribution with your own ISO and using your own license, including installing the drivers and setting up the virtual network adapters. The first thing we'll do is I went ahead and uploaded a Windows ISO. I uploaded Windows 7 for this tutorial, but for Windows 2012, for Windows Server licenses, everything except for 2003, this will all pretty much be the exact same thing. With Windows Server 2003, you'll have a little bit different drivers you'll use, but it'll be the same process. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to go ahead and create a new data center that we'll use for this one. I'm just going to call it Windows Data Center. And I'm going to go ahead and throw a new server in place here. And what we'll do, connect this to the internet. I'm going to just call this, I'm just going to call this Windows 7 for now, because it's just a Windows 7 box. I'm going to go ahead and put, just to make this a little bit easier, just 2 cores, 2 gigs of RAM. Select the Windows operating system. And in fact, you know what, we'll go ahead and number of cores, we'll leave that all alone. Networking, I'm going to go ahead and label my network adapter. I'm going to just name it ETH0, so we'll know that's the primary one. And this one, we're not doing any virtual networks or anything, any internal networks. So it's going to be pretty simple, straightforward, just to understand how to install your own ISO and make sure the drivers are working. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and add a virtual CD-ROM drive. And I'm going to select my own images. There's a couple I uploaded here. I'm going to select this Windows ISO here, which you can download actually directly from Microsoft. The only thing you'll need is your own key. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. And then I'm going to add one more. I'm going to add under the default images by Profit Bricks, and this is an important piece here. I'm going to go ahead and add the Windows Virtual I/O Driver ISO, which we've custom made for most versions of Windows here. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one. It says number 2, but I'm going to boot from the Windows ISO so I can do the installation. And the reason we want these both mounted before we start is because when we start to do a Windows installation, especially with Windows 7, you're going to notice that it won't be able to find a hard drive. So we're going to have to put this, we're going to have to have this image in there so we can, when we have to go through and select a driver during the installation for the I/O, we'll be able to select that. So now I've got that set up. Everything looks pretty good here. I'm going to go ahead and provision this. And we'll give this a second, and here when this gets done provisioning, we'll start the process. Okay, now our data center is finished provisioning, so we're going to go ahead and start the installation. Now, since we're doing our own ISO, where you get the email, Profit Bricks will be sending you the credentials with the administrator password by email. That's not going to happen in this situation because we're going to do a fresh installation, and we'll be setting the password during the installation. So just to clarify that a little bit there. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and now this is set up, we're going to go ahead and do remote console. Okay, our Windows 7 installation is now ready to go, and we're going to start the next process here, which of walking through the installation, just like you would on a regular machine you were sitting in front of. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Next here. Install now. You can accept the terms of agreement. I'm going to do a custom install advanced, not an upgrade. Now you'll notice here, this is the critical part where we had to we wanted to make sure that we mounted our ISO first up here in our storages. So we wanted to make sure that we had the secondary CD-ROM drive, which had the the virtual I/O drivers. And the reason why we needed that is because we needed to be able to install the drivers for the bus for the iSCSI bus here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and now we're going to load drivers, so we'll be able to see the virtual storage device and do a browse. And we're going to see, you'll see the boot drive, the boot X here. Let's see here. And you'll see, you'll see the D drive, which is our installation, boot, which is X, which is a virtual drive, and then D, which is actually the drivers. So under the drivers folder here, go down, go to drivers, and you'll see the different Windows versions depending on what you're using. If you're using a Windows Server 2008 or 2012, use these: Windows XP or Windows Server 2003 and Windows 7. So under Windows 7, I'm going to go ahead and select the AMD 64 because this is a 64-bit operating system. If for some reason you were doing a 32-bit operating system, then you'd select the x86. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And you'll see here we've got the virtual SCSI controller. So we'll go ahead and get that installed. Hit next. So now it's installed. Now we can actually see our storage that we'd set up. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and select that storage, select next, and let the Windows installation go through. It should be a pretty quick process. And then the next step is once that finishes, we're going to go ahead and log into the server and go under and install the network drivers. And as soon as this finishes, I will walk you through the next step. Okay, so our Windows installation is finishing. The final stages of copying the files over and installing. Then once this finishes up, we'll continue to the next stage of putting in a license key and getting the complete installation done. Okay, applying system settings, rebooting one last time. And if you're watching this video and you're looking for just how to install the drivers once you have a machine already up, of course you can fast forward through to the next step. So for this one, for the username, I'm just going to call it Windows Box. Password for this one, we'll just use the standard. Whatever password you want to use, and for this one, I'm just gonna leave the product key blank because I'm just gonna do it as a trial since this is a test box that we're not gonna leave online. But you could put the key in here, or with Windows, a lot of the Windows versions, you can also leave it blank and then put the key in after you complete the installation. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and just leave it blank. I'm going to use recommended settings. Again, these are all things you'll do depending on what you want to. I'm just going to set Central Standard Time because that's where our US office is out of, but you can also set different time zones based on which area your servers or which data center your servers in. You could also do it, have it in different areas if you wanted, if you had syncing for some reason, you wanted the server to be on a different time zone. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next here. And we'll finish the stages. And again, everything we're doing in this video, I'm just doing it on a Windows 7 box. But of course, this applies to a Windows 2012 server or a Windows 2008 server. So um, I'm going to go ahead and go up here now. Now the box is done and ready to go. If you run a Windows server, you could go in, same thing, go to a control panel. I'm going to go ahead and do a list view just to make it a little bit easier here. And so you have your server settings and other things like that. In this situation, we're going to go ahead and go into Device Manager. And again, you do the same thing on your Server 2008 or Server 2012 box. Under Device Manager here, we're going to see that we have the Ethernet controller that we need to install the drivers for. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click on that Ethernet controller and Update Driver. And I'm going to go ahead and browse my computer instead of searching automatically. And I'm going to go through Browse. And again, we're going to go back to this other CD-ROM drive that we used here, this virtual CD-ROM drive that has the virtual I/O drivers on it. And so we need to go down to Computer. And you can see the Windows installation CD. We actually want the DVD here with the drivers on it. Again, you'll pick your Windows version. If you have a Server 2012 or Windows 8, you'll use this folder. In this situation, we're going to use Windows 7 or Windows Server 2008. And again, I'm using a 64-bit version of the operating system, so I'm going to use the AMD 64. Next. And we're going to install this. It hasn't been certified by the publisher, so you'll get this. This is pretty normal for a lot of drivers that come in through with Windows. We're just going to go ahead and install this software anyways. It'll take a second here, and it'll go through and install the driver, and then what we'll notice, it'll show up here, and we'll be able to go ahead and set up our networking here. So while that's going through, I'm going to go back into my data center here, and I'm going to go to networking, pull up my networking information so I can see my MAC address, I can see my primary IP, and go back now to the remote login. So now it's finished installing the virtual I/O driver. So that's completed, and you'll see Windows has popped up that's saying networking. And depending on what you're doing, if you were installing a Windows 7 box, you could set this up however you want. I'm going to go ahead and put, for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and put work network. But again, you'll use whatever settings are best for your environment. So now that driver is set up, now we have the ability to go through. I have this one on DHCP, so it will automatically assign all the settings to the driver. If you did not have it on DHCP, then again you could go under your networking and set up and configure your network settings for that. You go ahead and configure the IP and other things. So if I wanted to go to change adapter settings, local area connection, select that one, right click, go to properties, and then TCP IP version 4, and you can manually set your settings in here. In this situation, since I'm already using DHCP, I'm going ahead and leave it obtain an IP address automatically. And that's it for installing a Windows Virtual I/O driver using Profit Bricks and the Profit Bricks image.